My name is Ciara, and today I have the pleasure of interviewing Thilan Legierse, who is the founder of this podcast, The Leader's Den. Aside from being an empathic and tactful individual, Thilan has not tread lightly throughout her life. Instead, her authentic, passionate, and daring nature has led her to lead through unbelievably diverse professional and personal experiences. From working as a human rights lawyer for the United Nations, assisting in war crime prosecutions, pleading a case in front of the Supreme Court in the Netherlands, to flourishing in her own business as a leadership and conflict resolution coach. Described as down-to-earth, humble, intelligent, and a natural people person, today we will hear from Thilan herself on her leadership journey and on her belief that great leaders are made and not born. So let's get into it. So Thilan, how did you start your journey with leadership?
Oh, well, first of all, thanks for this amazing introduction. So I guess I started my journey as a leader without knowing it. So I think the biggest thing is that it's also something I hear from a lot of other people, that we don't really realize that we are a leader because we're not a leader by title at some point in our career. And so I guess when I started working as a barrister when I was 24, I didn't think I was a leader, but actually I was, because I had to lead my clients, I had to lead myself, I had to influence, negotiate for better outcomes for my clients. So in hindsight, that's where I started my leadership role, but I didn't see it at the time.
Yeah, 24 is a very young age to be put into the deep end like that. And yeah, because your concept that great leaders are made and not born is such a humble approach, because a lot of time in the leadership space, there's this conversation of you're either a leader or you're a follower and everything in between. So you actually found that you had to make yourself more of a leader through your experiences?
Yeah, so the idea that some people are born and are natural leaders was something I believed as well, because that was just something people said. But the more I worked on leadership and in leadership and with leaders, I started to realize that even if you look at like people that I really look up to, as in Nelson Mandela or Jacinda Ardern or people, they weren't born like that. They had to work hard on their skills. With Nelson Mandela, I always feel like he was 26 years, in captivity, as the song goes, that I used to sing a lot in the 80s, I think. And all that time, he really worked on fine-tuning his skills, that in the end, he did the impossible, which was actually negotiating with the people who kept him in prison for so long. He negotiated his release. And so it's not true. I know that I am a people's person, as you said. So I have some skills that come easier to me, some of the leadership skills, but others, like, not being a people's pleaser or making hard decisions, are things that you really need to practice and consciously decide to work on. So nobody's born like that, and just it comes automatically.
Yeah, so for those who are interested in strengthening their leadership muscles, what would you say are some essential qualities of inspiring leadership?
Oh gosh, I think that it's just really important that it starts with you, and that I always say there's the three pillars to leadership. That's leading yourself, leading others, and leading transformation. And I think it starts with, first of all, to dare to see yourself as a leader. Most people, even people that I coach who are in leadership positions, they still don't really see themselves as a leader. But even if you're not in a leadership position, just to see that you are first of all, leading yourself, but you're also often a role model for people that you're not aware of. It could be your children, it could be the girl next door, it could be someone you work with. And just to understand, who am I? what is important for me? What are my values? Because I believe that if we are living in alignment with our values, then we can be our authentic self and we can really shine. And it's finding out who you are, what makes you tick, and start living a life according to that instead of trying to constantly please everyone else.
Yeah, so I'm pretty fascinated when it comes to how you said you work with, people who maybe practice leadership every day and they might still doubt their position as a leader. And it sort of ties in with that whole imposter syndrome. Do you think imposter syndrome is something that leaders experience? Does it go away? Does it stay? Or
yeah, it's interesting because I think from the statistics, it's something like 70% of people have imposter syndrome. And it's that feeling that one day somebody's going to knock on your door and going to call you out and say, hey, Thilan Legierse, you think you're a leadership expert? Well, let me tell you, and I'll expose you. And so I always kind of joke that if you don't have it, it might be that there's something up with you, and you might have some kind of personality disorder, but it is just something that a lot of us have. And so it happens to me, and it's, sorry, what was the second part of the question? Like you said,
does it go away?
oh, does it go away? I think there's ways to work on it and to become more aware of it and to learn to live with it and not have it keep you hostage. So is there a cure for the imposter syndrome? There probably is, but it takes work, and especially like inner work. And I guess it's the whole concept that we are afraid that one day we're going to be found out, or we are worried what other people think of it. I know for myself, it is a probably work in progress, and I am not sure if I will ever be there. The other expression that I really like is next level, next devil. So once you are where you feel really comfortable, and then you think, yeah, I've got it, no worries. And then before you know it, and you step up again and you do something else, and you again, this little imposter syndrome or the gremlins in your head, with a little voice who's telling you you're not good enough. So it's a fascinating thing. I feel like our whole life we're constantly battling our own brain, which is our biggest friend and also our biggest enemies at times.
Yeah, well, it's so nice to hear you actually opening up about, more so like the vulnerable aspects of being a leader, because there's a lot of conceptions in society that leaders are these hard-headed, take no crap from anyone sort of personalities. But how do you think vulnerability plays into leadership?
Yeah, I think of course now I am almost showing my age now. Like I've been on the planet for a while, and like in the last century there was a different leadership style that was really kind of accepted, and that was like that strong leader. I now like to refer to it like the Saddam Hussein kind of leadership style. And we see now, thankfully, in 2023 that is no longer the style that leaders can use. Definitely there's still leaders, and I meet them, that are using it, but it's not a style from nowadays anymore. And having worked on war crimes, I know that those people like Saddam Hussein and a lot of other leaders have actually paid a price. Muammar Gaddafi, the people in the Balkans, they paid a price for that leadership style. So nowadays we know that we live in a what we call VUCA world, a very complex, volatile world where many things are happening, and we can't be that leader anymore. Leader can't be the be all and end all. And so leader needs to be vulnerable and needs to be able to show people that it's okay, that you don't know everything, and that there's things that you can't resolve, and that you depend on your team. And that is far more powerful than just acting as if you know it all and having like reigning with an iron fist.
Yeah, well, definitely, you know, vulnerability helps to connect with individuals, but do you think there's a level of professional boundaries that should be maintained to be taken, I guess, seriously as a leader, or just in the workplace in general?
Yeah, absolutely. So great question. So first of all, I think there's a Harvard article that I always refer to, and it says we want our leaders to be warm, because you mentioned the word connection. And so we want our leaders to be able to connect to people. But at the same time, if we have leaders who are cold, who can't connect with people, I see it time and time again when I work with teams and organizations, that people can't connect to cold leaders. So we want our leaders to be warm, but we also want our leaders to be strong. So the reality is that if you are only warm and only fluffy, and then people don't really feel safe with you. So you need to be strong, as in having difficult conversations, holding people accountable, and setting boundaries. So the idea is, sometimes people have this strange idea that I often see when I do mediations, that a leader is like a different human being or something, and doesn't have any vulnerabilities and so on, and or can take anything. Because and that of course is not true. But at the same time, I do feel that as a leader, especially for instance when you are working with peers and then you become their leader, is one of those situations where you do have to change your boundaries, because you have to lead by example. So if you used to gossip at what is it called, the water cooler, and which actually gossiping can be very bad, but can also be good if it's done as a form of bonding and not negative. But that changes when you become a leader. You have to have professional boundaries, and you have to role model what it is, what communication looks like, what the work culture looks like. And setting boundaries is so important in all aspects of life.
It's a good fine balance between being vulnerable and not spending your entire workplace hearing everyone's stories about their personal lives and everything.
And the interesting thing is, because I work so much with teams where there's low morale or where they want to increase their performance, and there are some leaders out there who share everything, and the feedback I always get is people don't like it. If you are a leader who's constantly being extremely vulnerable and crying and sharing everything, that doesn't work well. So it's that boundary between, you are a human being, you have emotions, and you have your own boundaries, but at the same time you need to be strong and don't overshare. That's all I can say.
And, maybe remain focused on the main sort of objective of the company, as well as being warm and an engaging human being. But I'm interested, before you said how leaders are, sometimes they have the impression that there is all end all, and they know it all, and there's a lot of sort of teams that function on deriving every single piece of information or advice from their leader. How do you think delegating comes into play in leadership?
Yeah, so I think once we have our own leadership together and we feel confident, and I always like to kind of refer to being like a gum tree. Since moving to Australia, I really like gum trees, because they're rooted in the ground, but they also can withstand fires, droughts, extreme heat, and so maybe a limb will fall off it, or a branch will be, damaged, but in the end they know who they are and they provide shelter for animals. And so once we have that, we actually really need to, the next level of leadership is to nurture other people and empower them to become leaders.
Yeah.
So one of the mistakes we make, and I made it myself, and a lot of the people that I coach have problems with it, is delegating, because often we know if we do it, it gets done, and it gets done well.
Yes.
And so we've done it before. You can wake me up at 2:00 at night, I'll do it, and someone else is going to take them 3 hours, and you need to go through the report, and you need to change it or sit with them, and a lot of time. But the joy of being a leader is that you can help empower others and help them feel more confident about themselves. And so delegation and making mistakes is really important for leaders, and create new leaders. So ultimately, that when you walk away, or if you go on holidays, that you're not the be all and end all, and the helplessness, the self-helplessness, but that your team can function with you, and that you see a new generation of leaders coming up who you can help and coach.
Yeah, it does sound like that, you know, that tactic is more creating a high functioning team that, you know, is more sustainable in the long end. Not that you've got, you know, your kids are sick or you're sick and you're off for 2 weeks and everything just turns horrible and complete dysfunction takes over. So do you have any other tips for maintaining like high functioning teams? Is there anything within communication that is important to maintain?
Yeah, I think what happens a lot is that we're so busy nowadays that everyone is working so hard, and there's so many crisis situations. And so I like to call it like that we have to work on the business and not just in the business. So as a leader, if you're constantly just doing the work, then you're not using your leadership to the right potential, because what you need to do is actually have a vision and work on that vision, and make sure that even though it's crazy and everyone's running around, that you can share that vision, ask people to come on board with the vision, and help them contribute to that. And so that's often things people don't do because they don't have time for it. It sounds so simple, but that's often, it's just like that team building, the building the foundation, the what we call the forming, norming, storming sessions that are really important. And what I often see is people don't have time for it. So even people in high level positions, when I coach with them and I ask, what's your vision? They don't really know what their vision is, because they have so much on their mind that they haven't made time for the vision. If you don't see the vision, then how can your people see the vision? So it's a bit like you're standing in front of a piece of ground, and it's all mud, and somebody looks at it and thinks, oh my God, muddy, useless place. And someone else stands in front of it and says, hey, I can see a community garden here, and this is going to be a center for this, and we're going to have a little petting zoo there, and people start looking at it. Oh yeah, I can see that. And that's what I mean with a vision. And people want to understand, what are they doing, why are they doing it, and instead of just getting stuck in their little thing they have to do.
Yeah. And with that whole the whole vision in a workplace as well, especially with your multicultural background, I'm interested to think like, how do you think cross-cultural communication builds into leadership? Do you think leaders should have a capacity to understand the diversity within their employees?
I think that really depends on your own experiences. Like, I've been lucky enough to work for the United Nations for 12 years. So there's not many nationalities that I haven't met. And so I think so I have this cultural competence that is through lived experience. and not everyone will have that. But if you are aware that there are cultural differences and that you need to understand that, say, for instance, you've never been outside of your own country, that is maybe more challenging than if you are someone like me who's worked with so many different nationalities. But then, diversity in the workplace is so incredibly important. And we tend to, as leaders, not as leaders, as people in general, we tend to kind of go for the people who are like us, but it's just so much more powerful if we have people from different backgrounds. And just the one thing I've learned from working in so many different countries and with people with so many different nationalities is that we're actually all very much the same. So there are cultural differences, but as humans, we are all the same. So just to understand what the cultural differences are will help you to be able to tap into anybody. But in the end, it's not that difficult. So for me, I always try to understand like a bit more about the culture of another person and ask about that, and don't use culture or not understanding the culture or they're from a different culture as a kind of an excuse. Have that curiosity and also check, because I've often had people say, oh, in our culture is this and this. And then I checked with people and they say, nah, that's not true. That's just somebody. So, and we can learn so much from our cultures.
Yeah, so in what certain ways do you think that having a diverse range of staff can strengthen your team, just to be specific?
It's just because we are always having to look at how can we do things differently, and we're working with people, and so different cultures have different approaches. So you have cultures where they're very like individual minded. There's cultures where it's more about the team and about the group. And so we can learn something from every culture. If I look at myself now, I feel like I've picked things from the different cultures that I worked with, and my Dutch culture, my Australian culture, things I learned in the Balkans, things I've learned in Cambodia, things I've learned from working with the UN. I just kind of pick everything. But also that whole white privilege thing is coming to an end, and I for one am very grateful for that. So we need to just acknowledge that there's so much we can learn, and that the voice of the minority, I often say, is very important. And you want to have a team where everyone feels listened to, feels heard, and contributes, and no matter their background, no matter their role in the team, and no matter their cultural ethnicity.
Yeah, I think, as soon as people feel that they're valued and respected, you get the most out of them, because they're actually like, hey, I want to be here and I'm enjoying connecting with you and everyone. And just about diversity, when it comes to leadership, you often hear like, oh, there's these different leadership styles. And I know you touched on it before. And just about, I heard you say that being yourself and being your authentic leadership is like, a recipe for strong leadership. So do you believe there are different leadership styles? Is there a one size fits all, or is that something that has to come from within to make your own leadership style?
No, the thing is that as a leader, you need to be flexible. And so you may have your own style, but you need to use different styles at different times. Just the same with communication. So you may have, or conflict resolution. So you may have a certain default style, but you need to be able to use different styles at different times. So when you are forming a team, it might be that you need to use a different approach than when you have a team that is already working for a long time together. Or if you are a very collaborative person and you have a team member who is not collaborative at all and who needs to be held responsible, you'll have to adapt your leadership style. So the whole idea is that you need to look at the context, at the case and the scenario, and change your style when needed.
Okay, so it's like a more individualized approach for the best solution for that certain time.
Yeah.
And as well, what I wanted to know was that with leadership, it's often this sort of, I don't know, an isolated views that leaders are, you know, on the top of the hierarchy alone, not really engaging with anyone else. But what you do for work is you connect with leaders all the time, and witness leaders connecting with each other. So what do you think is the benefit about leaders getting in active communication and connection with other leaders?
Yeah, I think often what happens is that leadership is like a lonely position, because often as a leader, you don't want to put all the pressures towards your team. And sometimes, you know, either whether you're completely at the top or in your middle management, you don't get the support that you deserve, but you give all the support to your team. So often what I see is that leaders are carrying in an enormous load on their shoulders, and they feel very lonely. They don't come home and tell everything that has happened during the day to their partners, if they have a partner. So it's a lonely position. And that's why I've always been keen to have communities of peers and leaders where they can actually be vulnerable, because you can not always, we discussed that already, be completely vulnerable as a leader. And so that you can meet with other leaders and realize, this is what I love about putting leaders from different parts of the world together, whether you're working in a remote community in Australia, or you're in Scotland or in Mexico. As a leader, you all have the same issues. And so that really connects people together. And so often when people say, oh, I've got a really difficult staff member, I've tried everything, and you know, and then other people say, I have the same, and they're like, oh my gosh, you know, I thought I was on my own. And I'm always like, no, you're not, because I see this all the time. But just to hear it from other leaders is nice. And it's also, a lot of the people I work with are high achievers, and they can be really harsh for themselves. And so they're very kind to their staff, and they try do everything, but then they're not very kind for themselves. So just to realize that as a leader, yes, you're doing a lot, and you need to put your own oxygen mask on first as well.
Yeah, well, it sounds so good connecting everyone. And because, like you said, leadership is, although it feels like a solo position, it is sort of like a universal experience. And then having all these perspectives and insights and experiences from fellow leaders.
Yeah, and it's a journey. You're never there. So I will never be there. So it's not like, oh, I'm on top of the mountain, I'm the best leader I could ever be, nothing's ever bad is going to happen, I've got everything under control. Please contact me if you are one of those people, but I've never really met anyone who is like that. It's a journey. And if you embrace leadership and the fact that we're on this planet to grow and to serve, then you can just become better. And doing that with other leaders, and you know, growing together, learning from each other is just amazing.
Yeah, so when it comes to burning out in the workplace, you know, leaders obviously have a lot of responsibilities. It's a high sort of contact job with people of all sorts of different personalities, and you know, maybe even just dealing with some really highly stressful situations. So for yourself and what you've observed with other leaders, what are sort of some strategies that you use to prevent burning out?
Yeah. So first of all, just to be really aware that that is a real thing. And I think I often say that that was very obvious to me, because when I started in my law firm, when I was 24, almost the same week, the senior partner in the law firm actually woke up and couldn't walk anymore for 10 days. Wow. So it was no medical explanation other than that he had a burnout. So that was a great thing for me to experience in the 90s as my first job, that you could actually get a burnout. So I think I've had a lot of things happening in my personal life and in my professional life, but I've been really lucky that I've never come to burnout, because I think it always has been something that I thought that's not going to happen to me. So it's just having that awareness and practice self-care. I have a thing that I do, which is a resilience plan, constantly checking in with yourself and recognizing what the symptoms are, and then being able to say, okay, I need to take some distance, I need some help, maybe go have some therapy. I also do a lot of reflective practices also with groups and teams, because of course, having worked on war crimes and with a lot of refugees and domestic violence, these are really heavy things that you need to kind of process. And so I can talk about it actually for a few hours. So, but yeah, it starts with awareness and having a plan in place, and just recognize it for yourself.
Is there any specific symptoms that you notice in leaders that signify burnout?
I think when you're completely feeling overwhelmed, and that is very easy, because I don't know any leader these days anymore who knows like, oh, I can go home and all my emails have been attended to. Everything is, like the empty desk or something. Mm-hmm. I don't think that exists anymore. And then I think you need to be aware of does it show with me? For me. So for instance, I know if I start, binge watching Netflix and some really silly show, not like a useful documentary, what was it, Below Deck or something, like something, if I said, okay, Thilan, you've just watched like six episodes of Below Deck, I think this is actually a sign that you're really going, or you start opening a bottle of wine at 5 o'clock, but everyone has different, or you might start being grumpy at your partner, or you just need to know what it is for you. And so that's that self-leadership, that you help yourself to manage that and to seek help.
Yeah, well, we're going to wrap this up pretty soon. So I have one final question for you, and that is, just what are some key leadership lessons that you've learned throughout your career?
Oh, gosh. So I think like I said, is just to look at what you are doing and just to start seeing that you are a leader, even for those people who are not in a leadership position, and to also then decide for yourself, like, how do I want to show up as a leader? So constantly, I'm always checking in. What do I think is a good leader? And then I check in every day, like, is this what I'm doing at this moment right now? Is that good leadership? Is that how I want to show up? Mm-hmm. And if I'm not, then I need to kind of change that. So that's really important. Then the other thing is just to be kind to yourself and to accept that nobody is perfect and that it's okay to make mistakes. I think a big lesson for me was about, I was pretty good with boundaries because, I think starting as a barrister, I was good with professional boundaries, but I wasn't really good with personal boundaries. So I had to learn that. And just to accept that when you are a leader, you have to say no. And you need to make decisions. And I had a great mentor who said, better a bad decision than no decision. And that not everybody's going to like you. And that's okay. That you don't look for your approval from outside all the time, but you look from within. And the way I have the toothbrush test. So when I'm brushing my teeth and I look myself in the mirror, if I know that I've done the best I can, then that's good enough. But if I know that I could have done better, I need to go back and do better. Yes.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Thilan, for having me today. And I'm looking forward to hearing more of the Leadership Den episodes in the future. So all the best to you and your leadership. So yeah, that's it.
Perfect. Thanks so much for interviewing me. This was really nice because we didn't practice, so I wasn't
we
really
did
sure
not.
what I was going to get. But thank you so much. You had some great questions, and I just also, yeah, hope that people will start liking and registering for this podcast. And also you can hop over to thilanlegierse.com, and there's some free stuff that you can look into, some of the things that can help you with your leadership stuff. And if you're interested in one of our programs, then let me know. So thank you so much, Ciara. I loved doing this with you.
Thank you.
Bye.